I think that the fact of attention, and this is something, I'm not the only one talking about this, obviously. I come at it more through a philosophical and religious background, but the idea is that because of the necessity of the structure of attention, we cannot avoid hierarchies of meaning in the world. We cannot step outside of our own perception mechanism and perceive the world outside of the world of care, the world that we care about. But I don't see that as a kind of illusion. I'm not saying, well, therefore we can't see the world. Therefore, we're perceive the world through illusion. I think no. The reason why also the world formed us in that way, the reason why we're formed this way to engage into the world, means that it is the most appropriate manner to deal with the world, anyways. And you can't get out of it. So you can argue yourself around that, but it's like, why not then plunge into the world of the structures that we perceive through attention and care, and see them as the best mechanism to understand reality. And so, so therefore it creates a kind of vertical causality, which reductionist types struggle with, that there is a kind of causality of meaning that is part of the world, and not just mechanical causes and things bumping into each other and chemicals mixing, or that type of causality. So that's what interests me the most, and I try to join that vision. I think a lot of modern physicists and, let's say, contemporary scientists probably do see that, but I really try to join that with things like ritual, with notions like storytelling, images, and try to kind of join the world of complexity, let's say, and the more literary or more human world together.
Now, I'd like this interview to help people understand how it is that you see the world and get into what I call your Weltanschauung, which means it's the non-physicist theory of everything. On this channel, we interview different mathematicians and physicists about quantum gravity, or how do you harmonize general relativity with the standard model, and that's called a theory of everything. But then there's a cognitive theory of everything, a framework through which you interpret the world. And so I'd like to get into the nitty-gritty. You used the word vertical causation there, and I'd like you to help me understand and the viewers understand what that means, and then distinguish it from horizontal causation, and if there's even a third sort of causation.
Yeah, well, the vertical causation is, I guess, what Aristotle called the formal cause. In some ways, it's the cause of identity. It's the cause of purpose. And so, the issue that we often have is that we cannot get to identity from the parts. It's like, if you just calculate the parts, the identity is presupposed in the fact that you care about those parts in the first place. Do you understand that it's a problem? It's a chicken and the egg problem, right? So if I'm studying the parts of a car because I want to get to the identity of the car, well, the identity of the car is already presupposed in the fact that I'm studying the parts of that car. And so that's what I mean when I talk about vertical causality, is that the identity of something, and that identity is actually united to it's harder to see on the scientific scale, but let's say in the everyday scale, it's related to its purpose. There's a purpose that makes us see something as having an identity, and that is then when we measure the parts. And so that's what I mean by vertical causality. And I think that there's a relationship between that vertical causality, which is something from the identity to the parts, and how we have that relationship, and the more human aspect of vertical causality, which is something like, with my will, I can make things happen. I can make things happen with meaning. It's a good way of understanding it. So, for example, if I ask you to get a glass of water for me, you will not be able to find in all the actions that you pose the impetus for the action that you're taking. And that's an aspect of vertical causality too, that has to be taken into account, which is the capacity of humans to change, well, living beings, to change the world in which they live through something like will or autopoiesis, however you want it, whatever. I don't want to use a word that's too technical. The idea that we actually transform the world in our image, right? Or we affect the world in a way that is not just like things bumping into each other, that is purpose driven.
Is there a relation here between naming something and identifying something?
Yeah. So the idea would be that it's not the danger we have is if we fall in the objective subjective trap where we think, well, if I name something, then it's just arbitrary, right? It's like according to my whim. If you really believe in this kind of vision, then if you do that, if you just name something arbitrarily according to your whim, then at some point it'll pull back, like it'll break. It won't hold. The name won't hold. There has to be a union between the identity and the phenomena that you're kind of both noticing and naming at the same time. So the idea, for example, in Genesis, you have this idea that Adam names the animals, but he's naming them according to their nature. He's not just making it up. It's not it's not like I'm just going to name them. I'm going to notice their reality, but that's part of their ontological grounding is a good way of thinking about it. So it sounds really, really fancy, but it's not that fancy. Like we still do it today. It's like when do we decide that there's a new species of dog? It's like we have all these different dogs, and all of a sudden we're like, oh, I see characteristics that clump.
Right.
And those characteristics clump sufficiently that other people seem to be able to see them as well. And so I'm going to say, well, this is a species of dog, and I'm going to name it. So I'm not just arbitrarily imposing my will on the world, but I am dividing the world in a way that wasn't divided before. I am kind of noticing phenomena clumping together and giving it attention, and therefore making it participating in its existence in the world. Because before that, it was like, oh, they were just, I don't know. I don't know how it's obviously a process that goes over decades. Like, there are all these dogs, and all of a sudden we're saying, well, when these dogs mix together, and if they keep mixing together for a while, we're like, oh, and they create characteristics that we notice that they clump together, and then we name a species of a dog.
Uh-huh.
That happens all the time. Like people say, oh, well, they discovered a new species of, I don't know, of this like particular flower. And like, well, maybe before it was just, you just divided a species into two because you saw that characteristic clumped sufficiently according to what you want to be able to notice the difference. You have weird, you probably, I don't want to get into the details, but you have weird behaviors like saying there's a species of a plant and then there's hybrids. It's like, well, why is the hybrid not a species? And these are very, very human ways of clumping, let's say, phenomena together by saying, well, this is a hybrid and this is a species. It's like, they're all plants.
Okay, so you're not speaking about the specific name, you're speaking about the act of naming. So what I mean is that you could have called dog Fabaru.
No, I'm not talking about the word that's used. I mean, naming in the sense of pointing. Maybe pointing is a better way of thinking about it. It's like that there's something, like I'm pointing my attention to something, and I see the unity of the phenomena, and I give it a name in order for it to exist. The naming is part of it. There is a sense, like you see in mythology, these ideas, for example, that even in theology, you have these ideas that ancient man or God, when he names something, it's completely its nature that's being revealed. Whereas we now, our languages are somewhat arbitrary to some extent, not completely. I think they're showing that there are words that have certain meaning, kind of universal meanings because of their sonority, that we identify soft things with soft words, that we identify hard things with hard words. Like there is some more connection, but it's true that our language, in terms of just the relationship between the signifier and the signified, it's not always, doesn't stick always as much as it could. But it doesn't matter. Like it doesn't matter in terms of the notion of what I'm saying, which is like you identify.
You notice something as distinct.
Yeah, something is shining, right? Something is kind of glowing out of the background. It's being foregrounded against the background, and that's for a reason. Even if you don't know what the reason is, it doesn't matter. And then you identify it because it's entering into your field of care in a way that is bright, like it's brighter. It kind of shines.
Okay, help me understand how identifying something or noticing it as different than, or at least distinct enough for me to notice it, is something intentional, how that's related to care. Am I using the word care when I should be using attention? I'm not entirely sure. Yeah. And then to give an example, because all of this could be quite abstract, and that's entirely fine, you can give a symbolic example from the Bible and or an actual practical concrete example in people's lives.
Yeah, so I would say that I think using attention and care together is useful, just to help people kind of understand what we're talking about. Because the reason why we attention is something like the capacity to uh, identify things in the world, right, and focus on them. So I see that something exists. I can foreground it against a background. And care would be the bigger question, which is like, that is not arbitrary. Like, humans don't care about things arbitrarily. We have a hierarchy of care, which is related to living and dying and reproduction and all these things that make us what we are, and that things enter into that hierarchy of care. Like a good example to help people understand, let's say, what I'm talking about is, let's say you have a nation, right, and then that nation has an identity. I don't know. Let's say British, so you have British people, and the British people are actually made out of a bunch of people, right? It's like multiplicity is sufficiently joined together so that I can recognize an identity as holding them together. But it doesn't mean that multiplicity ceases to exist, right? Because a dog is made out of a bunch of stuff, but I look at the category, I have a category that unites all these multiplicities together so that I can grasp it, right? I can grip it into one. And so you have a British identity, you have people that are British. And then all of a sudden, and then you have a nice category, very important category, which is called stranger. And that category just means things that don't fit, with the British. And so, you function together. And then once in a while, there's someone who's around and you don't know where he's from. You don't know, he's not connected to you, and you have a term for it. You call it stranger. And then at some point, what happens is that those strangers, I don't know, they start to accumulate. And then suddenly you're like, oh, we're being invaded by the Normans. Oh, now they're Normans. They're not strangers anymore, right? Now they're Normans because of the relevance of care, right? This is obviously a relative example, but you could apply this type of, let's say, identification mechanism to anything. So if I walk outside and I'm walking outside of my house, I walk on grass. But grass is not one thing. Grass is a whole bunch of different biological species that I join together for very, very useful purposes into one category called grass. It's a completely legitimate category. It's completely useful. It's very good and everything. But if, for example, part of that grass is poison ivy, then all of a sudden, I'm going to start to care about that. And I'm going to start to identify it. And when I walk outside in the grass, for some reason, now I'm going to start to notice that, wait a minute, it's not just all grass. There's grass, and then there's poison ivy. And that poison ivy is actually not part of the grass. Yeah, I have to remove it. I have to take it out. But there could be something else that is in the grass, let's say, that's either dangerous or maybe tasty, or there'd be a reason why I would, let's say, specifically identify it, and then I would care for it in a different way. And so you can understand, the whole world is made of multiplicity. It's like there's just millions and millions and millions of details in every single thing that you perceive and that you engage with. But we have reasons to join that multiplicity into one. So for even on you, for example, we have bacteria on you that we consider to be part of you. And there's bacteria on you that we consider to be parasites. And it's like, why isn't that bacteria part of you like the other bacteria that we just say, well, that's just your gut bacteria. It's part of you. It doesn't share your DNA. It doesn't have your DNA, but we consider it an important part of you, Curt, as being a human. But if there's something that's, I don't know, making you sick, then all of a sudden we have a different way of dealing with that.
Okay.
Does that kind of help you see what I'm talking about?
I'm unclear as to what about this is Christian. So for people who
What do you
are...
mean, what is Christian? Why do you think that this would be specifically Christian?
Okay, well, for people who are either just tuning in or unfamiliar with you, you're an Eastern Orthodox Christian. Your worldview is heavily informed by the Eastern Orthodox tradition and your interpretation of it as well. So I want to know, is this something that comes from the Bible other than saying that God allowed Adam to be named and also God names people, and that's also from the Old Testament? So perhaps, is there something Christian here from the New Testament?
So, I mean, I think the best way to understand it is it's actually not, the basis of it is not Christian per se. It's just actually every single probably ancient tradition had very similar ways of understanding reality. In some ways, this notion or this idea of vertical causality was attacked, removed. I don't know. It's hard to say exactly when. At some point during the Enlightenment, it started to become, like some people say that Occam removed formal causes. I don't know if that's as clear as that. But let's say we start with Occam, with the idea that we don't need formal causes in order to explain phenomena, and so there is this movement away from the importance of formal causes into basically the idea that we could just do with mechanical causes. And so, in some ways, the modern West is an aberration, in that sense, on every other, I don't know, culture in the history of the world, maybe. And so, there is a use to what happened, in the sense that it created very powerful modes of thinking about mechanical causes, and it created very powerful modes of creating machines and creating things that were very reliant on those, on those types of causes. But at the same time, I think it was insufficient. And so what you see, I think, happening now with some people call the re-enchantment of the world, or all kinds of ways of talking about it, is a correction on that. Now, what I think Christianity offers in terms of perceiving the world in that way is the notion of uniting the idea of logos, for example, in ancient Greek thinking, with purpose and reason, but then also the idea of integrated with the personal, I think is very important. And then the vision of love as being the ultimate image of that, the idea of love as this capacity for unity and multiplicity to coexist perfectly, let's say in the Trinity, for example, becomes a model for the world, which is that the world is constantly this navigation between the one and the many, and love shows us that in fact they not only can coexist, but that is the mode by which they coexist. You could think of the love. Sometimes I like to define love simply as that. It's just the coexistence of unity and multiplicity.
The Economist covers math, physics, philosophy, and AI in a manner that shows how different countries perceive developments and how they impact markets. They recently published a piece on China's new neutrino detector. They cover extending life via mitochondrial transplants, creating an entirely new field of medicine. But it's also not just science. They analyze culture, they analyze finance, economics, business, international affairs across every region. I'm particularly liking their new insider feature. It was just launched this month. It gives me a front row access to The Economist's internal editorial debates, where senior editors argue through the news with world leaders and policymakers in twice weekly long format shows. Basically, an extremely high-quality podcast. Whether it's scientific innovation or shifting global politics, The Economist provides comprehensive coverage beyond headlines. As a TOE listener, you get a special discount. Head over to economist.com/TOE to subscribe. That's economist.com/TOE for your discount.